So now we will start by, I'll call upon people who have read the book to talk about what they got from the book. So first one to type was Brian. So Brian, go ahead. What did you think of the book? What did you get out of it?
For me personally, the biggest impact for me was understanding behavior so deeply. I keep thinking about the vector that he has in it, where there's like 8 or 9 different factors you have to consider in order to understand a certain act or behavior. Your prenatal environment, your childhood, your biology, your DNA, your ancestors, all these different things. And I went through some childhood trauma, and I've got animosity towards family members, and helping me understand them more, like my grandparents, for instance, understanding that they probably grew up with very little nourishing environment, and how big of an impact that had on them, and how they applied it to raising me, and it helped me forgive them for how cold they were to me, because I understand that they probably were cold. They were brought up in a cold environment with very little nourishment. So that was huge for me. And just, I took it as scientific proof that you shouldn't judge people. I mean, there's just so many things that you have no idea what they're going through. Nobody. So it's impossible to know and to understand why people do the things they do. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Next up is Dave from Tacoma. Dave, if you could unmute yourself. You're on mute right now.
Sorry, I was trying to use my space bar. But thank you very much, Shrikant, for this wonderful group. And the interesting thing is, I actually saw this book in a different group a couple months ago, and I happened to check it out from the library the day before our library is closed because of the virus. And just picking up the library was so imposing, 700 pages. And I'm not a guy that normally reads a lot, but because of the virus, I had all the time in the world to read it. So I set aside about a half hour every afternoon and dug into it. The first 2 chapters were really a hook. There's so much fascinating things. After that, to be honest with you, I read some psychology about 25 years ago, so I'm familiar with the brain. I've heard of the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, this, that, and the other. And the only negative thing I would say, he gets into a lot of minutia of all the different brain regions and things. But the other thing about the 700 pages, Carl Jung is very intelligent, but he writes everything so densely. When you have 700 pages, he gets Sapolsky gets into detail, writes it clearly, and I think he summarizes every experiment that's been done on either humans or animals since the dawn of time. And he loves to bring out the contradictions, that testosterone doesn't actually cause aggression and things like that. But the other thing is, plowing through it, you get to the end, to me, is the reward. I'm a member of Veterans for Peace, and if you saw the TED Talk, which was excellent, he talked in detail about the Christmas truce in World War I, which I'd only heard about and thought was a fantasy, but now I'm understanding more and more that really happened. And also My Lai, I was in Vietnam and luckily didn't see combat. And the other thing I was going to talk about in detail, but since you just want an impression, was about Nelson Mandela. And his dealing with the general of the South African.
Sure. Yeah.
Afrikaans.
Let's not. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's not go into details right now, because we want to get an overview from everybody.
Yeah, but see, to me, the main point was us versus them. We're so many ways we're tribal, whether it's the Christians versus the Muslims, this, that, and the other. And Mandela built that bridge. But yeah, it was. And the other thing is, he was emphasizing, like Mandela, but Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., that individuals can really change the world. And the ironic thing is he did not believe in free will, which I obviously do, but I guess because he can't explain it with biology. But
Okay.
it's a fascinating book. I've heard people say it's the most influential, the best nonfiction book ever written. But I highly recommend it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dave. So two big points that I get so far from what Brian and Dave have said is one, it looks like this kind of us versus them and trying to understand what is behind us versus them is a very big, big theme. And the second one is the fact that he looks at multiple vectors. I have seen his videos, and the TED talk that I posted was a tour de force. I mean, it was amazing how much ground he was able to cover in how short a time, and how clearly he was able to put forth the complexity of how complexity of human behavior. As Brian was saying, is the idea of vectors. The idea of what is happening, at the second level, what is happening at the minute level, what is happening at the day level, what is happening, at a year level, and much larger time frames, and then kind of an evolutionary scale. And all those factors are operative at the same time, and to be able to parse those influences, all those causations in a particular situation requires tremendous commitment to truth. See, we as human beings, one of the biggest things, one of the most useful books that I've read over the last year or so has been Daniel Kahneman's book of Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. And what he clearly shows is we mostly use system one, which is a kind of very quick kind of response. And that quick response has all these causations kind of built in to it. And so what Sapolsky, I think, does magnificently well is to show you all those levels and say, pay attention to these levels instead of jumping to conclusions. So that's what I got from watching the video. So let me go around and get people's impressions of the video. So for the video, keep your comments between 2 to 5 minutes. What we are trying to do now is we are trying to get as many points, as many kind of key points about the book on the table. I'm keeping track of all of them. Once we have put all the points down, we are going to go around and choose points to discuss. We'll probably choose like 3 or 4 points to go into. So let's start with videos. So Jonathan Friedman, what did you get from the videos? Jonathan, please go ahead and unmute yourself. All right, looks like there is some problems. So the next person is Yomna. Yomna, what did you think of the video?
Hi, everyone. Hi. I really don't feel like I have much to add to what's been said already. Just that I found the TED Talk that you posted fascinating, and it took me to his other videos. So I watched another one of his videos, and then I found his course at Stanford about, basically the same thing, but in much more detail. So I started watching that, and, I'm going to see how far into the course I'll be able to go. But I feel like you covered, the main points, and I don't feel I have anything else to add.
Okay, that's good. If you want to pass, you're welcome to pass, but I encourage you to speak, because one of the big things, one of the big values that this group provides is this back and forth. Put forth whatever thoughts you have, just be brief. If you have 5 points, pick the top 2 points that you want to put down. And that way we'll put some amazing things on the table, and we'll be able to discuss them. And we are going to learn from each other in the process of doing that. All right, next one is Bill B. Bill B, what did you think of the video? What do you think of Sapolsky's thought?
Thank you for asking. I thought it was an excellent TED Talk. I've heard other talks by him. He's a very interesting thinker. I'm really delighted to be participating in this conversation about such a topic because I think it's a valuable thing for us all. Just as Dave, was it Dave or one of the other previous, well, Dave too has interesting things to say. But Brian talked about how it put his family in perspective. I think it can put in perspective how our society is becoming increasingly atomized, divided, and people are in their political silos. And I think if there's ways to bridge that gap to get people to see each other as more human, I think that that would be very good. And that's something I feel ties in with what the video was talking about.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bill. Next up is Sanjay. Sanjay, what did you think?
Yes, so I was actually surprised at how he talked about the breadth of the effects that have impacted us. You know how we're formed. In particular, I mean, when he went back to even primordial effects that still have impact on us. I mean, I already understood that DNA is a result of our entire history, but he was saying that it's much more than we could even imagine. So I was surprised at that, but very intrigued.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent observation. I mean, that's one thing that I've found is that I think biology is going through a complete, renaissance. I mean, I think what we are learning about ourselves biologically, whether it is in genetics and epigenetics, how genes express themselves, their interaction with environment, what we're learning about neuroscience and what is going on in there, the level of knowledge or what happens between people in trying to study things. So it's just incredible growth of knowledge. And one of the values that Sapolsky provides is that he's able to bring in a lot of research done by people at a lot of different levels and kind of put it all together as in timeline, which I think is an amazing way of organizing. So absolutely, I mean, it just shows you what biology is there. And it's an ongoing process. We're learning every day, we are learning something significant. So it's in a golden age right now. Next up is Karine. What did you think? Karine, would you like to add something? Hi.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
So I've been a fan of Sapolsky's 15 years or so since I first heard him speak. I've read other books of his, but yeah, 700 pages is a lot. Not through it yet. So I wonder a few things. It always sparks questions, and I think everybody summarized extremely well. I wonder, for the immediate impulse, how well thought out was, it's a guy named Hugh landing a helicopter in Melee saying, "Stop, or I will kill all of you." So the thought process that comes in advance of that, how much you're aware of in the moment, how much you're just doing it, those are the things that I wonder about, because the ability, the instinct is something that we all want to create within ourselves, within our children, within our communities, and that capacity to do that on the fly. I understand how far back it goes to my typical non-medical, understanding of biology. I'm not a doctor, but I read and understand as much as the next lay person. I wonder if there are better ways for us to develop the habit of mind. So that's...
Let me ask you one more question. You're familiar with his work. I mean, forget about this particular book. Because what happens is that somebody like that, he has a certain view of life, certain approach to life, certain kind of base of knowledge. So if you're familiar with him, so tell us a little bit about Sapolsky. What do you like about him? what is it that you learned by
So,
listening?
so he spoke of his research with olive baboons, right? It's a particular kind of baboon, very well habituated, beautifully placed environmentally. And so it has, this species has an enormous amount of free time, which is extraordinary to find in troops of baboons. And as he put it, so they've got 8 hours a day where they're awake and they can do what primates do, which is just make each other miserable. And, you know, and he says it tongue in cheek, except he's serious, you know, because and he talks about stress and how our bodies react with it. You know, why don't zebras have heart attacks? Like all those, you know, so all of that stuff is tied together and it comes out. And he jokes further, like, I understand all this. Let me tell you, do not use this in the middle of an argument with your wife. She's not gonna laugh, you know. So there's a, you know, so there's a point of, here's this brilliant guy who knows all this, who's seen it across species, and in his own thoughtful life, after decades of dealing with college students who are volatile, right? There are all these kids there, and he doesn't just teach grad students. He's really, really specific about wanting to run the gamut and not offloading that part of people's intellectual journeys onto others. You know, so here's this guy who does all these wonderful things, and yet even Sapolsky in the moment misspeaks to his wife of decades, right? So when we think about all of these other examples, how do we take all of this information? We're not going to think of it in the moment. How do we not crack the mean joke? How do we say the kind thing? How do we, and this is my thing, how do we not freeze in the moment? I mean, I'm one of those people, years ago, a truck's coming down 7th Avenue, it's going to turn left, right, it's like a big SUV with somebody who's talking to somebody, the driver, as opposed to watching the road. She's going to hit my daughter, and in stopping my daughter from walking in front of the truck, I inadvertently punched my daughter in the gut. Now, it stopped her. I would rather be the person who can stop her kid and not punch her in the gut. You know, because when I put my arm out to stop my daughter, there was no control in the movement.
Right.
Somebody who's piloting a helicopter, somebody, like, there are a million examples. That's just the easiest, most dramatic one.
Yeah.
That's a difficult task. Physics says a helicopter shouldn't fly.
Excellent.
So that's my question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This was very, very good context. Let me go next to Revant. Revant, what did you think of the video? What do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, I watched his, you know, his entire Stanford course as well, and my major takeaway from him is that it's kind of a death toll to you know, all sorts of philosophies that believe in free will or any kind of judgmentalism, because you have a wide range of phenomena for which we morally condemn people. And you know, so where his research is going is that slowly, gradually, he's bringing all those phenomena under the ambit of like neuroscience. And you know, like studies such as that a large portion of people who commit crimes have some sort of physiological brain damage, and that, you know, there are prenatal factors and other very physical factors that can govern behavior. So yeah, my major takeaway is the slow disappearance of the notion of free will.
Got it.
That this kind of heralds.
Yeah. Ina, what did you think? Ina, go ahead. You can mute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Yes. Hi. I read the beginning of the book, and I think I like it very much, like 60 pages or something. So I might probably finish it. So for me, what was very interesting in his book, that I think he is a very deep thinker, and he's just against thinking like you put everything in a bucket. So somebody committed a murder, and you think, oh, that's because of his upbringing, and another person saying, oh, it's because of his hormones, or that's because of his genetics, or because he's from this country or that country, or that's just his brain malfunctioning. Or he thinks that you have to combine everything, and it could be like a different approach for everything, because like our thinking is like too flat and one-dimensional. So maybe if you like see this multi-dimensional picture of everything, it would help us analyze everything better, just not in one direction, but in many different directions. That was my major takeaway from this.
Thank you, Ina. Claire, you're next.
Yeah, I haven't read this book, but upon looking him up, I have read a primate's memoir, and I want to echo some things that were said here. I read this book a long time ago. It really has stuck with me, and they follow this sort of troop of baboons, and as was said, as they watch these baboons sort of look for, over decades and decades, look for a food source, and then suddenly they find an infinite food source, and you see all these things start to develop in the baboons, like stress and like rape and like hierarchies. And then they've sort of watched at how that has influenced health and aging and all these different sort of hierarchies within the structure. So I think it's just a constant, it's sort of, as you said, Ina, he tells stories through different ways. And I think the way he tells it through these sort of troop of baboons is the way we create these structures that sort of torment us throughout our lives.
Excellent. I mean, I want to follow up on that. I think that, primatology is a very big deal because, my favorite author on that, there is a guy called, I think it's Franz, he's from Sweden or one of the Scandinavian countries, Franz de Waal, I think. That's how we pronounce it. He's a primatologist. And when you actually study primates, you find something really remarkable. What we are discovering is that they are far more complex than what people used to think that they are. Like what is going on there is very, very complex. And a lot of it is very similar to what goes on with human beings. Now, people don't want to, for a long time, people have not wanted to admit that. But I think that's a very good base to start with. And if you do not pay attention, you kind of always go at that level. And even when you're trying your best, those kind of system one reflexes are going to show up. And so it's good to know that they exist so you can watch out for them. So the next one up is Wendy. Wendy, go ahead. Wendy, you need to unmute. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say the opportunities to do meetups across the country are just amazing, and I hope that they continue after lockdown.
One thing for sure, I'm going to continue to do these hybrid meetups. As soon as this thing is over, I'm going to start doing the in-person meetups, but all the in-person meetups that I will do will have an online component. So I'll be broadcasting it. We'll figure out. I have actually experimented with this, so definitely. And I'm going to help, if you, where are you from, right?
San Diego, California.
San Diego. Okay, so we'll have something going in San Diego also.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. It's a blessing for people with disabilities who have trouble getting out, among many other people. But so this is my first, I didn't even know this person until I watched the video, and I had seen Sam Harris listen to some podcasts and his video on free will. So my interest in it is kind of selfish. I'm trying to look for a way to let myself off the hook for, a critical mindset, self-critical. And meditation helped a lot with that when I was able to meditate. I struggle to meditate now, but anyway, I think it's amazing. I don't know about all the research, and I don't always trust research, but if it's true, it really is an opportunity to let everyone off the hook kind of thing.
Okay. There is one more Wendy who has, so could you the other Wendy, could you go ahead and say what you think? You need to unmute yourself. I'll unmute you.
No,
Yeah,
I've
go
got
ahead.
it. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks. I didn't have a whole lot to say right now. I mean, I like listening to people, and then, something comes up later on, I might comment on it. My background's in biology, so a lot of what he was saying during the TED Talk wasn't new to me. So at the moment, it's not revelatory. So, but I haven't read his book. I've just watched the 15-minute TED Talk. So, I'm just listening, and if something comes up, if someone brings something up, I'll raise my little hand. And
sure. Let me ask you one question. Given that you are in biology, if somebody is familiar with biology, because that's what he is, he's kind of steeped in biology. So for you, what is it that somebody steeped in biology knows about human beings that most people don't know?
I don't know. That's hard to answer. I would say, I don't. It's hard to know what people know and what they don't know. I would say that a lot of behavior is a mixture of nature and nurture. So it's it's brain anatomy, it's genetics, but then it's also lived experience. So it's some combination of all that. I mean, maybe people, when they think about these kind of things, I would say the tendency probably is for people to look from a kind of a reductionist perspective, that whatever the behavior is due to one thing, and that the complexity is probably the aspect that people miss, because I mean, just the field of biology becomes more and more complex every year as people are looking at more in-depth studies. So there's a lot to learn there, and with all my training, the longer I go, the more I realize how little I know. So
Wonderful.
There's the wisdom.
Excellent. Brian, you're next. What do you think?
Yeah, like I just wrote, how similar we are to like the smallest forms of life on Earth. We have so much in common with plants and the insects and bugs. That's what amazes me with biology.
Wonderful. Let's see. Jeff G, go ahead.
I'm going to leave my camera off because when I go to another.
That's fine.
Up to sign this here.
Folks, feel free to turn your camera on or off, whatever you feel comfortable with. Go ahead.
But what I wrote while I was reading the beginning, and it really was quite striking, because it put together so much biological research of which I'd seen pieces everywhere. But when I wrote, and this is over a year ago, I'm conceiving of neuroticism now as trait A for anxiety, aggression, anger, alarm, I think he calls it excitability, advantage, amygdala, and perhaps anti generally. The amygdala gates the hippocampus and so expresses that only unstable, unpredictable environments offer opportunities for new knowledge. This phrase, precarious arousal of the sympathetic nervous system, suggests a connection to Barrett. This would be Lisa Barrett Brown, I think. Optimism then correlates with the observed tendency of damaged amygdala.
Can you tell me what you're reading out?
I'm reading my notes from when I read it. So like I haven't looked at it recently.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Well, it's only about 2 more sentences. Is
okay,
that okay?
Go ahead.
So optimism, which is one of the traits, although it's not in the MBTI, I think it's the opposite of neuroticism. Optimism then correlates with the observed tendency of damaged amygdalas to be overly trusting in face of repeated betrayal.
Okay.
The insula and amygdala don't activate.
Jeff, this is too detailed.
All right. Yeah.
Let's take an overview. Okay. So what I did was that I looked at kind of several people who have summarized the book, And I tried to see, kind of the common patterns that emerge. Now, we have identified some common patterns already in this discussion. So one is kind of this multidimensional vector way of looking at human beings. The second one is to be aware of this us versus them theme that keeps popping up in human affairs. The third one was the issue of judgment, kind of rushing to judgment without understanding underlying factors. The fourth one was about understanding your kind of reactivity. You're kind of reacting kind of negatively immediately, and to kind of see what is behind that. And the last one was kind of hope that if you understand all of this, we can be more human. Let me just look at kind of the various themes that I saw kind of pop up. One was epistemological point. He keeps on saying that the value of strong opinions weakly held. That's a very interesting term. It's like, it's very important to kind of crisply summarize what you think you know. And at the same time, be open to evidence that you are wrong. Clearer you are about what you think you know, the better you will be actually at testing out whether it is true or false. And epistemologically, your commitment has to be right, not to be perceived as right. So actually, you should be looking for things that would actually show you that you are wrong. So but this is an epistemological point, and this is very much true when it comes to complex things like human interaction. So even when you have a judgment, you have to be open to the possibility that you're wrong, and you should be looking for, one of the things that I learned from Thinking Fast and Slow is that you have this confirmation bias, that you hold a certain evaluation, and then you're looking for information, only that information that supports your view, and you're not looking at anything else. There is information contradicting. So you have to be on the premise of looking and saying, if I was wrong, what would I expect to see? So that's a way of kind of providing a corrective mechanism. So that's kind of epistemological point. Then this idea of multi-level cognition, kind of understanding the levels. There is a very interesting point about the nature of volition, and that is about cognitive load. What happens to us when we have high cognitive load versus low cognitive load? What is our ability of initiating will, if you will? He looks at how dopamine works. He looks at how amygdala works. He looks at how testosterone works. He looks at the phenomena of priming, of what is it that you saw before that kind of shapes how you're reacting. He talks about the power of oxytocin. He talks about gene expression, the fact that genes are not, it's not predetermined that genes will do something. It depends on how genes interact with the environment to have its effect. Another big theme for him is kind of in-group versus out-group. Again, the us versus them approach. These are some of the things that that I saw when I looked at kind of multiple kind of summaries of the book. Now let's look at which of these things. So we can pick some of the things that. Let me see how we are doing on time. We're about 45 minutes into this. So what I want to do now is I want to pick about 2 to 3 topics that I would like to discuss in great amount of detail. So I'm going to propose the following ones. One is the idea of multi-level, vectors, things happening at multiple levels. We can talk about that. So that's one option. So multi-level. So you can, if you want to talk about that, you can type in multi-level. The second is we can look at this theme of us versus them, which is a very large theme. The third one, we can look at the issue of judgment. Based on what we know about this, which ones, how do we judge other people knowing all of this? So these are the three things that I can think of. That's not actually that many, so we can actually do all of these. We have time to do all of this. So first,
can I mention something? Is it okay?
Who's speaking?
Organic jerk.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, that's has everyone here done, or at least most people here have done the reading, or?
No. We went through all of that. So the people who have read the meaning. Have you read the book? Or
no, I watched the TED Talk.
Okay, so
I want to be open
can
about
you so could you please summarize in about 2 to 5 minutes what you think of Sapolsky?
What I think of him,
or his thought.
Yeah, I mean, I was struck mostly by the end and his well, not the end, but the whole focus on moving backward and moving backward and moving backward, and so it almost seemed like deterministic, and he had this like it was lacking free will, right? And then he ended the talk by saying that we should learn of people who do outstanding acts to then build ourselves into doing outstanding acts ourselves. But of course, before that, he talks about what is essentially determinism, right? Like
sure.
This lack of free will
Thank you. So what we did was that we went through everybody. Everybody kind of put their 2 cents.
Right.
What we are doing now at this stage is that I'm trying to collate what everybody else has done. I'm picking some themes, and we are going to be discussing these themes one by one. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So let's go to that. So the first theme is that of kind of this multiple level causation. What is happening in at a 1 second level? What is happening at 1 minute level? I would say that is when, if you look at the other issues of us versus them and judgment, I think this is the main point that is a takeaway. This is the main metaphysical point. This is kind of understanding of who we are. Other things like the judgments that we make or the us versus them is a consequence of this. So how about we talk about this point first of, the value of understanding all these multiple levels of cognition. So if anybody has something to say about it, you can go ahead and type in the chat. You can put an exclamation mark, or you can raise your hand. Zoom, I won't be able to see everybody's hand if you raise the hand in Zoom. So you can go ahead and type in exclamation mark, or you can go ahead and raise your hand in Zoom. There is a feature for raising your hand. So any thoughts about this point? Wendy, did you have anything to say? Wendy Beveridge? You have unmuted. Okay, I'm going to mute you. Okay, let me see. All right, anybody? Okay, how about the 2 people who have read the book, Dave and Brian? Okay, yes, so Brian, could you talk more about multidimensionalness? Go ahead. You're on mute.
Yeah. So for me, the goal I have in mind a lot of times when I read things like this is to try to become a better thinker. And like you said, it's good to know these things exist so you can watch out for them. And that's exactly how I approach a lot of this. I want to be aware of these different thought processes. I want to be aware of my tendencies to be biased, and all these different things. I think if you put them all together, can make you a better thinker.
Thanks. So one way to do this is to, let me see, George, you've been saying things. George, please, can you go ahead and talk and tell me what you're saying? I'm not able to follow what you're saying in the chat, please.
I'm listening. I'm just going to listen tonight. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, sounds good. Just wanted to make sure that I address what you're saying. Okay. So
can I raise one other point?
Please go ahead.
That after other people talk, that he's always questioning, and thing that really brought to my mind is he brought up a big issue about our criminal justice system, where their prisons and jails are effective, which is very counter, our, but, and I thought about, he didn't really brag about it, but it's obvious he's gone over to Africa every summer for 30 years to observe apes. He's a very questioning guy, but that's, to me, was a very important part of the book.
Okay, let's do one thing. I want to give you one more option of doing, because there are multiple ways of doing these discussions. What are the questions on your mind? After listening to all of everything that we have talked about it, what questions are in your mind? So go ahead and type in any questions that you have, and maybe we can deal with the questions. But one of the themes I want to talk about is about us versus them, because like I was trying to look at this kind of multi-dimensional thing that is all about what is, okay, and that's something that we have to take in. But us versus them is somewhere is the place where rubber hits the road. That's where kind of a lot of actual human interaction and kind of issues with human interaction show itself. So we'll probably we might look at that one. Okay, so Sanjay, you're next.
So I think talking about multidimensional aspect of our behavior, I mean, one thing that, again, I didn't read the book, but I have read on this topic in other areas. And, people may not realize that when he says that our behavior, let's say our instant behavior at a moment in time, is affected by the microsecond before and the second before and the minute before, and all of these things that happened, it's affected by all of those things, as well as all of our history going back millions of years ago. All of that packed together is what drives every instant of our behavior. That's a very complicated thing. So for example, the amygdala was shaped by our evolution, and it was shaped by how as an earlier animal species, we were affected by our environment and other, competitor species or the entire environment. And today, that amygdala is functioning the way it does affects us when we are looking at another person. So this concept of us versus them, I think, also is driven by the core brain, which the amygdala is a part of.
Yeah, that's very good. So let's follow up. I mean, if we look at this us versus them, right? I mean, it definitely starts at the primate level. I don't know whether it starts before that or not, but I think it's definitely there in the primate. Like if you look at like a tribe, I mean, you can see, for example, in chimpanzees are very, very violent to other chimpanzees which are not part of their tribe. And if you come across some if a chimpanzee come across chimpanzee from another tribe, it's automatically seen as a danger. We evolved in a group of 30 people. That is our evolutionary heritage. So there is a lot in us that immediately reacts in that way of us versus them. So that's Ayala, you had something. Go ahead. You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, to get into the us versus them and evolution. It looks like when we look at the big picture, as the previous speaker showed, we are all the same. We're all the same, we are all somewhat different, but basically have the same repertoire. The evolution was, we were prepared by natural selection of a wide repertoire of responses to our environment. We had a very simple environment at that time, Paleolithic time, and after hunter-gatherer time. So the repertoire was very protective in terms of gave us some aggression to defend ourselves against the bear and also to chase the bear when we are hunting, but also with cooperation and affection so that we can continue the human species. Also, we have to cooperate in hunting the bear. 3 people are better than 1. However, as some observers said, we got all this repertoire without a manual. So we have changed the ecology so fast and so radically that today our ecology is not anymore hunter-gatherer.
Yep.
It is information.
Yep.
We are in an information.
Right.
And
I mean,
we can't.
the big transition that I see is between kind of the hunter-gatherer stage and the agriculture stage, because at the hunter-gatherer stage you're still in this tribe of 30 people, and we are actually very we kind of evolved in that context for a long time. Relatively, civilization is very recent, and what happens in a civilization is that you're living now in a city with 5,000 people. Now that's very different. So you do not know people. You do not know everybody that you run into. And it makes possible a scale. It makes possible the wealth, long life, all kinds of things which are amazingly good. But just the phenomena of having to deal with so many people is against our kind of biological heritage, where we are used to dealing with a small number of people. And I think that is the thing that is at, that's like a continuous war with each other. So anybody else has anything to say about kind of us versus them?
I hate to monopolize, but yeah,
Please?
us versus
Yeah, go ahead.
them is a big problem in our society. If you've seen the video from February of the black man who jogging through the white neighborhood that was killed for jogging, it's, if you notice, it's not illegal to kill a black man in our country. We pretend it is, but it isn't. And we thought in the last 10 years or so, when everybody has a cell camera and people would start taking pictures of black men getting killed by police or just by any white man, that, oh, that would be stopped and there'd be justice, but there isn't. And it's a sad, sad commentary in our country. I'm sorry. Bye.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, can I take it way back to more
Sure.
of a primal sense?
Sure.
So on a very simplistic level, the us versus them is also a tactic of survivalism, because I should not immediately trust, all of these strangers if I'm living in New York City and just open my arms and my home and my wallet to them or whatever. I have to first kind of assess the situation and see if I'm going to be safe in the company of whomever, or, a business I decide to invest in or whatever it happens to be. So that is to protect me and to keep me alive. That us versus them innate sense that we have at a very primal level.
Very good. Now there are a number of questions that people have asked, so I'm going to read some of them. And so first question is from Karin. How do we move from general to specific in us versus them? When the young soldiers stopped playing, why did they not turn in group on their own superiors, superior officers? I mean, that's an amazing question. I mean, anybody would like to talk about that? I mean, I don't know. It's like I find that what happens is that there are structures, like social structures, which exist, and these structures are kind of accepted by the people at some times. There are special contexts in which people are willing to act outside of those structures. It takes a great deal of courage for a person to do that. Or it takes kind of a special situation, like, okay, it's Christmas, and the officers have allowed it, something like that. So, but otherwise, the kind of the social norms that people have are quite persistent. Sanjay, go ahead.
So I just wanted to give my input on that. I think, so we're talking about the military. So one thing to realize is that in the military, everyone, especially the lesser ranked troops, are taught, it's inculcated in them from the beginning for years and years to follow the chain of command. So it would be very difficult for them psychologically to attack or go against their superiors. So probably that's what was happening.
Okay.
Although innately they were feeling very horrified at what was happening, but their training had stopped them from doing it, I suspect.
Got it. Next question is from Sana. The question is, given all the variables he discussed, how will we, if ever, understand ourselves and others? It is too complicated, and science is too primitive to address all these variables. Now, that one, I've thought about quite a bit. And I mean, my take on this is that, look, we are human beings. Yes, we are complex, but that doesn't change the fact that we need to act. We need to live, we need to make choices. So for better or for worse, we have to make the choices based on the best information that we have. So what we need to do, and fully knowing that we don't have the full information, and we cannot have the full information. But at the same time, so I think the solution to this is the idea, epistemological idea that I was talking about in the beginning, to hold strong opinions and hold the strong opinions weakly, in the sense that having a clear idea of what you think is the most probable thing, but be open to correction. And and to keep doing that, because most people think like their immediate kind of approach to knowledge is Platonic, in the sense that they would say, oh, let me take in and learn everything, and once I have learned everything, I will start acting. No, life is not like that. Life is a process of action. So whether you like it or not, implicitly you're making decisions, and you have to make decisions. So it is much better to be kind of cognizant about what you know, what you don't know, how well you know something, and be always open to correction. And the process of actually applying even wrong ideas is a way of getting the feedback that you need in order to correct them. So that's how I would think about it. Does anybody else want to add something else? Okay, let's go to the next question. This is by Revent. Revent, why don't you ask the question in person? Go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, I just asked that: do Abrahamic religions or any kind of moral judgmentalism, like, does it have a foot to stand on when a lot of traits which are condemned by these systems, in particular related to aggression and sexuality, are increasingly shown to be determined by your brain structure, etc. For instance, there tends to be a certain brain structure to homosexual people, for instance. And so I was just saying that, like, will this maybe kill those debates once and for all?
Okay, does anybody want to take the question? Okay, I mean, on this issue, I think the best thing I've seen is by Jordan Peterson. And that's like kind of a very interesting combination of kind of the notion of values. I mean, what he does is that he looks at all of these kind of past traditions and tries to abstract from them, tries to see what is it that they are trying to accomplish. So that's one thing that he tries to do. He tries to see if there is, what wisdom is there in all these traditions, not as a particular tradition, but across traditions. This is actually a Jungian approach. Jung does this all the time, kind of looking at multiple cultures and seeing what common patterns kind of emerge from that. And the idea is that if these patterns occur independently in multiple cultures, maybe it is pointing to something about human beings. So that's kind of one thing. The second idea that Jordan Peterson has is the idea that of pursuing your values. So what you do is that you pursue the values and you take the feedback from that in order to kind of correct themselves. And like most kind of traditional systems of morality are inflexible. They say, okay, these are the morals and you better do that. Whereas the kind of things that Jordan Peterson is saying is that he's saying that you do need kind of values, you do need kind of you need virtues, but all of these are kind of tested in action and you have to discover them in the process of living. So he's on one hand kind of rejecting kind of traditional fixed values and virtues, and on the other hand is rejecting the nihilistic view of saying, okay, because this thing has fallen, there are no values at all, or there is no virtues at all. So that's the best thing I've seen on that.